Hi, I'm Brian Dickson, founder and principal of Bus Business Consultants, and welcome to Ground Transportation Insights. Brokers or intermediaries have been a hot topic in our industry for years. Some operators see them as competition, others as partners, and the reality is often somewhere in between. In today's conversation, I sit down with Harald Kruse, CEO of Global Charter Services, the parent company of BusBank. Harald has been working to position BusBank as more than just another broker, with a focus on building stronger partnerships with operators. Let's hear his perspective, and then you can decide for yourselves what it means for your business. Good morning, Harald. Thank you for taking the time today to have this conversation. As you and I have been talking for some time, there are several common themes that are prevalent in the ground transportation industry in terms of working with brokers, including margins, payments, customer relationships, brand, and safety. So I'd like to discuss each of these points, and then we can wrap up by examining the future of brokers or intermediaries in the bus business. So how does that sound?
That sounds great, and thanks for having me, Brian.
All right, let's dive in. So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about BusBank and how you differ from the traditional broker?
Yeah, first I'd say that, look, we don't perceive ourselves as being a broker, right? BusBank was founded back in 2000 as the original online brokerage, but the business model really shifted when we acquired the Busr.com technologies in 2018. And since then, I really think of ourselves as an online marketplace that really combines supply and demand for charter buses. A broker, in my mind, sells a trip high and buys it from the cheapest operator. And that can be done by phone, right? We spent millions of dollars on a technology platform, and we do a lot more than that, right? We spent 25 years collecting and curating data on bus operators, and we understand who's reliable. A lot of that came from our longstanding relationship with Lancer Insurance and the Laney family. But we really match the trip to the best qualified operator, not necessarily the cheapest. And that matching all takes place in our database and is relied on a number of different factors, from FMCSA and the general government safety ratings to insurance, and to more specific things to us, like responsiveness from an operator to us, and the performance of all the hundreds and thousands of trips we run every year, the performance of those trips and how well they run. In addition to a number of other factors around location and association, the quality of the vehicles, et cetera. So that's always an evolving and improving part of our business. But we really consider ourselves the first true marketplace in this industry. And like I said, that goes back to Busr's founding in 2013, and really the combination of Busr and BusBank in 2018.
Great. Thank you for that. I didn't know the history of BusBank. I venture to say a lot of folks who are watching today may have not known that either. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So
Sure.
As we walk through each one of these issues, the first issue I want to talk about is margins and costs. So as you're aware, and as we've discussed, brokers are often viewed as cutting into already thin margins. So how should an operator weigh the trade-off between slimmer margins and the reduced operating costs that come with working with BusBank?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question. Look, obviously we need to charge something for our services, but we also take a lot of costs off of the operator, right? There's sales and marketing expenses, and I would estimate that's 5, 10%, maybe 15% of budget, especially if you add in salaries of salespeople. I think look at your own P&L and make an assessment of what those costs are, and also operational costs. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money and effort in making sure that trips run correctly. I like to say that the customer doesn't speak bus, right? They come to us and they have a need to move a lot of people, but they don't know what the vehicles are called. They don't know how to do the logistics. They don't know how to do it. They come to us and essentially say, help me figure this out. Our team of experts, who've been doing this in some cases for multiple decades, then translates and packages that into a trip in a format that the bus operators can easily action, right? They can read it, accept or reject it, right? We don't force anything onto the bus operator. And then even further, we then make sure that any trip changes are correctly and clearly communicated to the bus operator, and importantly to the driver as well.
It sounds like a very dynamic system.
Yeah, so we take a lot of, the short story on that is we take a lot of costs off of the plate of the bus operator in that. And yeah, we expect to be paid a little bit for that.
Understood. Can you share an example where BusBank's reach brought an operator business that they likely wouldn't have secured on their own?
Yeah, definitely. There's a number of different examples I can think of. A good example here is we work with a major multinational accounting and consulting firm that have selected us as their partner for all of their meeting and event planners and their travel planners as well. And they really just want one resource to come to for all of their needs, which are all across North America, including Canada. And those trips, like I said, they might come from one planner in New York and another planner in Kansas City and another planner in Seattle. But we use our stable of bus operators to fulfill those trips. And those trips can be as simple as an airport pickup and a Sprinter van, or they can be a complex 500-person convention or large meeting that they're running where we have to stage buses and shuttle people back and forth from one location to another. So that's why it's important for us to have a stable of operators to choose from and figure out which one is the best one for that specific service.
Thank you for that. One of the other issues is payment delays. I know you know that the brokers have a reputation in the industry for not paying on time, and that then creates cash flow issues for the operators. So what can operators do on their end to ensure that they get paid as quickly as possible when working with BusBank?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of this, especially at the last UMA I attended. And it was really disconcerting that some people in the industry aren't paying out the bus operators. I feel like this is a really big differentiator for us because our systems are set up so that our payments go through very quickly. The most important thing for our system is that you close the trip after the completion. As soon as the trip is done, make sure that any other extras, tolls, overtime, cleaning charges, or even that everything ran as planned is communicated back to us and the trip is closed and we get the payment out in a very short order. What's important to know about our system is that our funds for each trip are kept separate. So there's no commingling of funds ever. And that we only get paid when the bus operator gets paid. And that's by design and systematic, right? In our system. So I think that's a big differentiator between how we do business, how we always intended to do business, and how our competitors are doing business.
Now, there are times, obviously, when a client, I'm sure, will come to you and request specific payment terms that may be outside the norm. It could be a large event or something like that. It could be a government agency that just requires longer payment terms. Do you have any systems in place that help you lessen the cash flow pinch when a big customer either requests extended terms or perhaps the terms were known up front, but then the customer just takes longer to pay?
Yeah, look, for us, it's not really systems, it's process, right? Where we try to negotiate down any extended payment terms. But this is a reality that is present everywhere in industry, right? Like large corporations and the government in particular are sometimes asking for really 60 and 90-day terms. And we try to negotiate that down to a more manageable level. And then importantly, we communicate that clearly to the bus operators so that the bus operator always knows when they're going to get paid out. So it's really a process more than a system. But like I said earlier, we're in the same boat with the bus operator. We want to get paid as quickly and reliably as possible. And then we make sure that our operator partners are taken care of.
If you had to grade the industry on payment practices, how do you think BusBank compares to some of the other traditional brokers?
Like I said, I think I've heard some pretty harrowing tales from competitors over the last 2 years. And in relation to that, I would say that we're an A or an A plus. We consistently pay out our bus operators, and to my knowledge, we have no outstanding debts to any operator right now. Yes, there's always some cases where there's a dispute going on, but we actually have implemented a system that we would love to see, in addition to the trip closing, we'd love to see additional adoption of, where we ask you to put in your trip ID from your systems into ours as well, so that if there is any dispute on anything, we can reconcile everything quickly and get you paid what you are truly owed as quickly as possible.
That makes sense. All right, let's talk about the customer relationship. So again, a perception in the industry is that brokers either block or dilute the operator-customer relationship. Many operators as we've discussed, view brokers as competitors. And they believe that if the broker didn't exist, the customer would come to them directly at a higher margin. And that may be true, but it also may be true that the customer may just go to another competitor. So how do you respond to the idea that brokers take business away from operators? And what can operators do to better position themselves when working through BusBank?
Yeah, I don't view the bus operators as a competitor, and I don't think that they should view BusBank as a competitor. They should be viewing us as a distribution channel that's additional to their core business. Today's marketing environment really works best at a national scale, and bus operators are inherently local, right? So there's a mismatch of capabilities and expectations there. And there's a need for somebody to be there in the middle and actually provide the marketing on a national scale and distribute it fairly to good bus operators. I think that the customer relationship, unfortunately, because of the way that we do business with translating the customer needs into a trip, it has to stay with us. And then our decision of putting it to a bus operator that's one of our partner operators is just how we do business, right? But that's the trade-off for offloading the costs of marketing and operations onto us, is that you lose some of the customer relationship. But as I see it, in an industry with 60% asset utilization, obviously differs by different bus operators, we give you another channel to introduce your brand to the customer and get that big, beautiful billboard on the road and rolling where people can see it and drive in more business from that strategy as well.
The next question is related to this. Again, one of the perceptions out there is that the brokered trips hurt the operator's brand identity. I guess my first question is, do your customers understand that BusBank doesn't actually own the buses that they're going to end up traveling on? And if so, how can operators ensure that their service becomes the defining impression of that trip?
Yeah, so we're completely upfront with our customers that BusBank does not own the buses. And I think that's important. I don't like the idea of promising something and then having something else show up on the day of delivery. But it's not really our role to promote the brand of the bus operator in the trip. But if you do a good job on one of our trips, the customers will remember that and will remember that bus. It really has to do all around the driver and making sure that the driver is set up for success. I think that's both BusBank and the bus operator is dependent on the driver to be delivering the best experience to the end customer. So we're all in the same business of ensuring that the driver is set up for success. But I view the brand issue as an interesting one because there is no nationally recognized brand in the charter bus space. I think customers know Greyhound and maybe FlixBus now, but that's it, right? And as long as a broker is bringing you new business and isn't interfering with your core existing customers, all the new trips that we bring you are opportunities for you to showcase your brand.
And as we talked about earlier, BusBank's not really competing for the same customer because you're not really operating in the local market. Correct?
No, that's right.
There are some brokers out there who are operating in the local market, and that is a reality that many operators are dealing with, but that's not really your lane.
No, that's not our lane. And look, we're much more interested in the larger customers and the larger corporate customers that have needs, or tour operator customers that have needs all over the place, where we can use our network and our scale to help. And yeah, are there some trips that come to us as a virtue of bycatch, if you will, of digital marketing? Yeah, of course. But the core business for the bus operators is really in their local market. And it's a local school, it's a local business, it's all those kind of trips, all those kind of accounts that comprise most of the trips that the bus operators should be running on a daily basis. And we're just on top of that. We're the icing on the cake.
Okay. Let's talk about unrealistic demands. As you and I both know, another reality is that brokers will oversell or push unsafe or unsustainable trips. So how does BusBank set boundaries to keep trips safe and realistic? And what should an operator feel empowered to say no to if a trip doesn't align with either safety or compliance standards?
Yeah, this is a big concern to hear, actually, that this is something that's popping up in the industry because we are really highly focused on the safety of our trips. I think this goes back to our relationship with Lancer Insurance. What we're really trying to do is translate the customer's demand into an actionable trip, right? And if that demand has something that is unrealistic or dangerous or can interfere with driver hours, we try to actually work with the customer to build that trip into something that is more sustainable. We don't like having overnight trips, right? We don't like, it's very difficult to put two drivers on the same trip. So we try to break up trips in a way that is easily handled by an operator. So we provide that level of support before it ever gets to an operator, right? And if our competitors aren't doing that, that's a concern to me, but you shouldn't see that kind of request coming from BusBank.
Understood. This has been a great conversation, Harold. I've got one final question for you. As I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to talk through each one of those issues and then finish up with talking about the role of the intermediaries in the future of our industry. As we've discussed previously, it's unrealistic to expect to win all business directly. Nearly every operator works with an intermediary, such as a broker, even DMCs. They function in many ways like a broker. They're just less controversial because their scope is smaller, and they also offer value-added services, meet and greet services, things like that. So I think the perception of the DMC is a little bit different. But as you look across the landscape and you think about the traditional broker, you think about BusBank, you think about even DMCs, what is the role of the intermediary as the industry moves forward?
Look, I think intermediaries will always play a role in this and every other industry, right? Like I said, it's a distribution channel. And the question is just how the industry chooses to work with these intermediaries. I was attracted to this industry because I saw an opportunity that the rest of the travel industry has already taken advantage of. And that's really being able to see supply and availability of supply and pricing in one location. That happened in the 1980s in the airline industry, in the hotel industry, and that still isn't a reality in the charter bus industry 30, 40 years later. And I think that's something that we all need to work together on. The bus operators, the associations, and the intermediaries can work together on for our mutual benefit, right? And for the benefit of the entire industry. I think there's a lot of room for upside in this industry. And I hope that our operator partners will continue to be willing to strive towards that.
Well, thank you. Harold, this has been valuable as the brokers have been a hot topic in the industry for years, and that's likely to continue. But I think your perspective certainly helps that conversation. So I appreciate your openness, and I know that operators will benefit from hearing directly from you.
Yeah, I hope so, Brian. Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, thank you again for joining me and for taking the time to have this conversation. For those of you who are watching, thank you for watching this edition of Ground Transportation Insights. I hope this conversation gave you a better understanding of the broker-operator dynamic, and it sparked some ideas for how you can approach these relationships in your own business. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss this and future conversations, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments because I'd love to keep this conversation going. Thank you again. Thanks again, Harold, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Look forward as well. Take care.
I hope this conversation gave you some food for thought. Harold's perspective adds an important dimension to a debate that's been part of our industry for years. What's clear is that intermediaries, whether you call them brokers, marketplaces, or something else, are part of the landscape. Some approaches create real challenges for operators, while others can bring opportunities. The key is understanding the trade-off and deciding how or if these channels fit into your business. I'd love to hear your perspective. How do you see the role of intermediaries in your business today and in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more discussions like this on Ground Transportation Insights.